Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another installment of Knives 101. And today we're going to be talking about blade shapes, or designs, however you want to consider it. Now, I've been excited and also hesitant to do this subject in a Knives 101 episode, because blade designs are very much like music genres, and everybody has their own opinion of what some particular blade designs are considered, when it really doesn't matter that much. So I'm just going to give you a basic summary of a bunch of commonly found blade designs. Now, here again, blade designs are only as limited to the maker's imagination. There are, hundreds of new blade designs being made each and every day. Both outrageous kind of radical blade designs and innovative yet simple blade designs nobody's seen before. But that's in custom makers. And as I've stated in the previous episodes, this is meant for the beginner knife enthusiast or the knife lover that may not know a whole lot about the ins and outs or specifics about certain knives in general. So I'm not going to worry about custom knives. These are commonly found knives, and these are going to be the most common blade designs. But this does not represent every blade design that's out there. Like I said, I'm going to give you the pros and cons of all of these different blade designs, interject my opinion here and there, but you guys know that I stay pretty much non-biased. So I'm just going to give you the pros and cons and what each blade design was pretty much designed for. So, alright, I'm just going to dig into it. I'm going to talk about one kind of specific topic at first. Let's kind of move this eye candy out of the way so it's not that distracting. I'm going to talk about the recurve blade design. I'm sure that a lot of you, even if you are beginners, you've heard the term recurve before. And what a recurve blade design is this. Just if you have not heard of a recurve design. A recurve is where the blade is partially shaped like an S. And you can kind of see that. It's going to be hard to see against that white background, that high polished blade. Here's another representation. See how the edge is not straight. You see it has a very subtle curve to it, like an inward curve. Like I said, it is subtle on that one. This model is a lot more abrupt. See a nice S shape. Now, what this is going to specialize in is that little shape right there is going to, let's say you're cutting rope or string, paracord, anything like that. The material is going to gather up in that little, kind of like that little U shape. And it's going to stop about right there because that's kind of the apex, if you will. Kind of know what I'm talking about? It's going to gather up your material there, and it's going to keep it from slipping over the belly. It's going to gather your material up there and then just rip right through. That's the advantage of a recurve. It's excellent for cutting media such as, like I said, cord, rope, string. Also, you can gather up like not linoleum, but like vinyl in there, carpet, other types of media such as that. So that's what a recurve specializes in. It bunches up material, and that little kind of dip, it gathers it up and almost traps it. Kind of like, let's say this is a string and this is a normal knife blade. You go to cut it, it just kind of glides over it almost. If it's sharp, it won't, but it's almost like trying to cut string with the belly of the knife. With a recurve, you have that shape. It's going to grab and it's going to keep the material from sliding forward anymore. It's going to trap it and then just rip right through it. So I hope I explained that in the best way possible. Hope you guys know what I'm talking about. But that's what that specializes in. It's really good for cutting different types of media like that. Got too much light going on over here, I think. There we go. The disadvantage of recurve, and I know a lot of people don't like them because of this one particular reason, they're harder to sharpen. Obviously, you have a flat stone, that recurve isn't going to be able to be sharpened on that flat stone. So what's required for you if you're going to own a recurve knife and use it a lot, it's pretty much required to own a rod sharpening system where the sharpening stones are rods instead of a flat bench stone, such as the Spyderco Sharp Maker, the Smith's Croc Stick, things like that. There are other makers of it, but you can also take a normal sharpening stone and hold it up on its side and then use the edge of the stone. A bunch of different stuff like that. Now, like I said, that's a really abrupt recurve. This one is a lot more subtle. You can actually sharpen this on a flat stone and strop it very nicely. Also, the other advantages of recurves is that generally they have a big swooping belly, such as this. A nice big belly you can use to make draw cuts on material, such as opening up packages, slice through the tape. So you don't have to use the tip a whole lot. You can use that nice abrupt belly, just like this model has. So the belly is good for EDC cutting tasks. So that's pretty much the advantages of a recurve. Now, what I was just talking about, about the cutting superiority of having that kind of U shape. What takes that one step further are Hawkbill style blades, such as this. This is known as a Hawkbill style. You'll hear some people call it a karambit, but a karambit is actually a knife style in and of itself, the entire knife. When it's just the blade, it's considered a Hawkbill blade. Remember, karambits always have the rings at the bottom to put your pinky through. But anyway, Hawkbill style blade. This was originally designed after a tiger's claw. This is a fully serrated. Rather, it's fully serrated or plain edge, doesn't matter. That design, that hook shape, like I said, it was designed after a tiger's claw. And you guys know what a tiger's claw can do. There's a reason why they're not extinct. Because they're very proficient in using their claw. The advantage of this design, as well as the swoop and a recurve, this just takes it to a whole new level. The entire blade is that design. So the entire blade can trap rope-like material and just cut it with absolute superiority. Mainly, this blade design was meant for self-defense. It was meant for eviscerations, which just means to disembowel, rip open someone's stomach and then intestines. Yeah, it's disgusting. But that's what this is designed for. That tip digs in and just... that's a good way to explain this. You have a normal blade design, right? Let's say you're cutting over a material. See how the blade, when you're cutting, it just kind of moves away from the material? That's just a natural reaction it's going to have because it's curved. That blade design is curved. So it's going to naturally kind of swoop like this. It's going to follow the angle of the blade. With this design, where it curves inward, it's constantly going to bring the material it's cutting back into itself. Meaning it's going to just be an absolutely devastating blade design for self-defense and for cutting rope. Which this is a Spyderco H1 Tasman Salt. It's actually designed for cutting rope on ships, on boats and whatnot. So that is obviously one great application for a Hawkbill style blade, especially one that's fully serrated. The way it's designed also, see how it kind of follows the curvature of an arm, like a wrist? Great for self-defense, especially being fully serrated. You're in a grappling situation, use it, just follow the curvature of somebody's wrist or their arm, their thigh, perhaps even their throat or groin. It's disgusting to think about, guys, but that is a realistic application. You might need your blade for self-defense, God forbid. I don't recommend it, but at least you have something. And you always usually have a very acute tip with these Hawkbill style blades, obviously aiding in penetrating, and then, like I said, like a hook, when you penetrate with that tip, the entire knife is going to follow through. Your material is not going to slip away from the knife. It's going to be trapped into the design and just aid in ripping. Very devastating blade design. Like I said, look on YouTube, look on here of some videos, look at pictures of how tigers can eviscerate their prey. This knife can do the pretty much exact same thing, just with less force. So, very devastating blade design. Now, EDC-wise, it's not that great. Here again, unless you're on a boat and you need to cut a bunch of things like rope. That's what this was designed for in particular, this particular knife. So recurves are good for EDC and also can be good for self-defense like any blade. This design primarily self-defense, and it just looks cool, you know. But this was primarily designed for self-defense. Karambits, same exact blade design. Karambits are excellent for self-defense. So that's the primary role of that blade design. Next we'll talk about the Tanto blade design. Otherwise, it's also called a Tanto, or pronounced Tanto. I pronounce it Tanto, but it doesn't really matter either way. I've heard people say it either way. But a Tanto design is basically, you just have a straight edge, straight design, just a straight grind, stops, and then abruptly changes angles at an almost 90 degree. This is known as an Americanized Tanto design. The original Tanto design was used in the samurai's katana. The katanas are Tanto styles. But it's a much more gradual. If you want to get a good representation of a Tanto design, of a traditional Tanto, look at the CRKT Hisatsu folders. That's a much more traditional Tanto, where the secondary tip is a much more gradual tip. This is a much more abrupt, acute, penetrating tip that was redesigned by Cold Steel here in America. That's a little history lesson for you guys. They designed the first Americanized Tanto, from what I've been told. Now, the application of the Tanto design was originally for penetration. It was meant to penetrate armor and to have a reinforced tip. That's why you don't ever usually see swedges on the top of Tantos, because a Tanto usually has a very thick, not very, but it has a thicker tip than most knives to aid in penetration strength. Like I said, the original katanas were used to penetrate armor, and then that secondary tip was used to bite in and slice through, you know, their cutting media. But like I said, you have that nice acute tip. Obviously, you can use that for cutting open packages, you know, because it's like the tip of a razor blade. That right there is the secondary tip. It acts as the primary tip of a knife. So that's why Tantos are also good for self-defense, because in a normal draw cut, that secondary tip right there acts as if it's the tip of the blade. So it's as sharp as that primary tip. So you can just imagine, when doing a draw cut, you're doing as much damage as you would drawing the tip of the blade across somebody's flesh. So it's a very, very good design for self-defense. That's primarily what these are designed for, but I know a lot of people carry these for utility use, because you can use that flat portion right there like an X-Acto knife to cut open packages, and it works very well. The thing about Tantos is that they're kind of hard to resharpen, because you just have to sharpen this portion right here and be very careful to stop right at where that angle, that abrupt point starts. Because if not, if you just, you know, sharpen all the way through like you would a knife of this blade design, you're going to roll that secondary tip, and then it's just going to be a normal belly. You're not going to have that abrupt acute tip. So it does take a little bit of practice to sharpen a Tanto properly. So that's why I don't really recommend these for EDC cutting tasks, because it takes a little bit more knowledge to sharpen properly, and you know, they don't offer enough, in my opinion, in an EDC roll. You don't have a nice belly to kind of do roll cuts, but I do know a lot of people that carry these, and you can too. I'm just giving my opinion. If you guys really like this, of course you can carry it for your normal EDC cutting tasks. But primarily, here again, this blade design was meant for self-defense. A very acute yet strong tip, and a very acute secondary sub-tip, which is used for slashing and penetrating. Because, like I said, that tip is going to dig in initially, like the tip of the knife will, and aid in cutting. Similar design, kind of the same category, the Wharncliffe. This is the Wharncliffe blade design, named after the person who came up with it. Not exactly sure of first name there. But you can see it's just a straight angle. It is just like a razor blade. You have this nice swooping design going down towards the tip. Kind of looks like a reverse blade. Like, it looks like it should be like this, doesn't it? That's the way most people are used to seeing their knives. Just like that. But nope, it's pretty much the exact opposite angle. You just have that straight angle, which is your edge. Now, these are also good for self-defense because you have a very nice tip. And here again, the blade does not roll away from the material that you're cutting. It just constantly pushes into the material you're cutting. So, very good. It's also good for utility work because, like I said, the material is going to stay with your blade design. So it's good for utility. However, you don't have that belly. So when doing cuts flat against a surface, it's kind of hard sometimes. Primarily, people use the tip of their Wharncliffe style blades to cut, which is going to result in tip wear. So your tip is going to wear down somewhat fast if you're doing a lot of cuts on wood. You know, it's going to, depending on what steel it is, it's going to wear down somewhat fast. But you do have a nice acute tip with Wharncliffe style blades, good for penetrating any kind of media that you plan on cutting through. So it's just it's a pretty good blade design for utility work. And it's not honestly what I prefer for EDC, my normal everyday cutting tasks, but it can be used as that. It's nice for, like I said, draw cuts. Fairly nice anyway. Like I said, it doesn't work as well in my experience as a knife with a big belly. But so it's kind of an in the middle. It's kind of like in the middle. It's a little bit better than perhaps a Hawkbill for EDC. It's a lot better than a Hawkbill for EDC, but still not as good, in my opinion, as the traditional drop point style blade. Now, this is where the genres get kind of iffy. Not genres. Blade designs. Because a lot of people look at this and say it's a spear point. Technically, this is a dropped point. Meaning that the spine goes down, it drops down, and then that's pretty much the direct meaning of drop point. But the point drops down on this knife, but it's a Tanto. So it's just kind of technically, like I've seen forums online, there's websites that go into very nice detail, more detail than I can go into about what a knife is considered. So you can also look it up online. But this is normally considered a dropped point style blade. They sometimes have an unsharpened swedge up top, like that, which strengthens the tip and also makes the angle a little bit more acute. But see what I mean here? You have a nice belly to that blade to do nice draw cuts through your material. But like we're talking about with these designs, is that it's going to roll away from the material as you draw cut. Now, it's going to cut, but your knife is going to more or less roll away from the material. If your knife isn't absolutely razor sharp. Like I was saying with these knives, mostly your material rolls back into the blade itself. So take that for what it's worth. Take that how you will. But I prefer these in an EDC roll because you can do much more things with it, in my opinion. Yeah, you have a nice tip you can use. You also have belly, so you have options. So you can use that belly to do nice roll cuts across wood and whatnot to cut things like paracord, food preparation, and it's just an overall, in my opinion, it's pretty much the overall. It may not particularly excel in one thing, but it can do almost anything pretty well. So I know a lot of people are going to disagree, but that's kind of how it is. This is just a very nice overall EDC blade design. So obviously you can also use this for self-defense. Don't get me wrong. It just doesn't excel in the devastation that some of these other blade designs can offer. But that might not be what you're going for, you know? I'm just saying if a self-defense blade is what you're looking for, then one of these might be it. You know, like a tactical, quote-unquote tactical knife that can also do some cutting tasks every day. This is mainly just an everyday cutting task blade design. So taking the tactical part out of it, self-defense part out of it, that's what that is. Kind of in the same category, I should have brought this out when I was talking about the Wharncliffe. This is known as a modified Wharncliffe style. See, it has that dropped point like the Wharncliffe coming down to the acute tip. But I don't know if you can see, it's kind of hard to tell, it is not a straight angle. Now this is technically considered a modified Wharncliffe because it doesn't have enough of a belly. But you can see it does have a tiny bit of belly, especially compared to a real Wharncliffe design. This is a modified Wharncliffe. It does have a small amount of belly to do a little bit of cutting with, you know, draw cuts and whatnot. But you're also going to have the same advantages as the Wharncliffe style. So, along with that, you have reverse Tantos, which is shaped just like a Tanto. You can refer to some of the Benchmade Osborne designed knives for a reference of what a reverse Tanto looks like. I don't personally have a representation of it right here, but that's a modified Wharncliffe. It has a tiny amount of belly. Then you get into things like, this is pretty much brand specific. This is known as a leaf shape blade, pretty much made popular by Spyderco. So what that is that you have a nice belly, but then you have the same exact curvature of the spine. So it's like a mirrored image. You know, you can see how the blade is the same. It's like it's like a leaf shape. You know, you have a design that's like this on both sides, the spine and the edge. So what you have is a very well balanced blade. You have a wide blade, which allows you to have a full flat ground design like this one is. So when you make the blade wider, you have more room to make that grind going down towards the cutting bevel to be able to make it a more acute cutting edge. But that's kind of veering off of what we're talking about just a little bit. But I'm saying that the leaf-shaped blade definitely has its advantages as well. So you have that nice belly. You have usually have a very strong tip because the blade is a wider design. But I like the way they look. That's a pretty good looking blade design. And overall, it's a great design for EDC. And for, you know, you can do penetrating with that tip as well, of course. Almost in the same category, we have the spear point / dagger / bayonet style. Now, Microtech has automatic knives with a bayonet style blade that are just like this, where it looks double-edged. You have the unsharpened swedge up top, ground, making it look exactly like the main cutting edge right here, but it's only ground halfway on the spine. That's technically considered a bayonet style. But you see how the blade is here again, like we're talking about the leaf-shaped blade. With this one, the spine of the blade is the exact same design as the main cutting edge belly of the blade. But where this one is basically shaped just more like this, it's mostly considered a dagger / spear point. Whereas this is shaped the same way, but it has a belly. It has more belly to it. So it's more like, kind of like pear shape almost, if you will. So that's where that goes from leaf shape, and this goes to a dagger design. Now, since a dagger design like this doesn't really have, it has a little bit of belly. These blade designs are designed to be very thin. And what I mean by thin is in this dimension. I guess skinny, if you will. This is a real thick design. You can see the difference. So obviously what this design aids in is penetrating. That's it. This is meant to stab primarily. Of course, you can use the tip to cut open your mail, cut open packages. Same thing you could any of these knives. But that's what I'm trying to describe is that every blade can do these same exact things. It's just some excel in other departments than other knives. So don't get me wrong, this knife can do anything that these knives can do, but it doesn't excel in the same ways that they do. So that's a dagger design meant for penetrating, mainly for self-defense. Alright guys, just to kind of reiterate, if all of these knives, if any of these knives are really sharp, they can all do the exact same thing as any of them. One of these knives can do the exact same thing as all the rest. They can all cut. They can all pierce. But what I've been saying is that some excel in other departments, and some departments than others. You know, you have your drop points, you have, you know, your recurves with more belly, your leaf shape. Those are going to obviously be better at, you know, draw / cuts. But, you know, your Tantos and your Wharncliffes and whatnot, they can still do the same thing, just not as well. So don't feel bad, don't feel undergunned, no matter what kind of blade design your knife has that you're sporting on your person or that you use for any particular task. Just know that some designs will assist you in a particular cutting task than others. You know, that's something to think about. So that's what I hope this video could do. Could help you guys see the different advantages so that you will know going into buying a knife perhaps what kind of blade design will assist your particular cutting needs. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something. And of course, if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments box, guys. All right, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay sharp, and God bless. Sherman 614, peace.